As surprising as this superpower might be, if you are an X-Men fan and you've been watching some of my other X-Men superpower videos, you might not be as surprised to see this one on here. It's implied in the comics that Kitty Pryde was also trained by Charles Xavier to steal her mind against telepathic attacks. She even managed to resist Karma, and by extent the Shadow King, who was possessing Karma at the time, from breaking into her mind. As I've said before, if you want to be an X-Men, you gotta get that telepathic resistance. That should be like a requirement.
Pheromone manipulation. He ain't called the beast for nothing, wink wink. Oh god, I'm so sorry. Jokes aside, Hank has a nifty ability that allows him to manipulate pheromones in a minor extent. Not of others though. He can secrete pheromones from his own body to attract members of the opposite sex. While this isn't seen a whole lot in the comics, or barely at all to the point where some have actually speculated it to be a widespread misconception, it is actually stated in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe A to Z Volume 1. So maybe Hank just likes to keep this power off the battlefield, if you know what I mean.
Human Kree physiology that makes her resistant to most toxins and poisons. Carol Danvers became part Kree when she was caught in an explosive blast delivered by a psych magnetron device. This fused her DNA with that of the first Captain Marvel, who was full Kree. At this point, she became Miss Marvel.
Jean's powerful telepathic abilities allow her to sense almost any entity that could be in her vicinity. She's even been able to sense a Watcher before, although I don't think she knew quite what it was, cause, you know, she couldn't see it. She can also use her telepathic senses to hide herself or others from being seen or found, both physically and visually. Using telepathy, she could make you appear invisible to others when you weren't. She could even change your appearance in somebody else's mind. In fact, her level of power means she could use this power to cloak multiple people and herself all at once if she so chose.
Evidently, super speed doesn't just affect how fast your body moves, but it affects the mind. Quicksilver is able to think faster than the average human, allowing him to perceive reality faster and respond accordingly. And if you think about it, this is pretty much essential to anyone with super speed. If you can't perceive what's coming at you when you're moving, you'd just be running into everything. In fact, as a result, Quicksilver has an arrogant personality, which writer Peter David explains is a result of this, stating that Quicksilver lives in a world filled with people who don't know how to use cash machines, and want to know all the ways to send packages to Africa, and can never get your order right in a Burger King unless you repeat it several times. That would tend to make you feel very superior to everyone and very impatient with everyone. I like that, that's really well thought out.
Let's begin with the basics. Domino is a mutant who has an ability called probability manipulation. This allows her to subliminally and psionically initiate random kinetic phenomena that affect probability in her favor by making improbable things occur within her line of sight. This is also often referred to her as having good luck, and causing her opponents to have bad luck. It's worth noting that this ability is only capable of letting highly improbable things to occur, not impossible things, so the probability is always grounded somewhat in reality, despite however absurd the events that occur are. Now this could range between a foe's equipment failing for them or causing an overloading nuclear reactor to shut down based on a stray shot of her weapon. And we still don't know the full extent of what her powers can do.
While he might not be the leader we'd all like for the X-Men, Scott Summers is more often the one that his fellow mutants need. Professor Xavier actually trained Cyclops for the role since day one as a young mutant who had been there since the beginning. So when people ask if he deserves to be a leader, the answer should be an emphatic yes, as he has been training for this role pretty much his entire life. A master tactician, Cyclops usually has his eyes on the bigger picture when it comes to problem solving, meaning sometimes, in order to achieve something good, he can be willing to do something that other heroes might deem as bad or downright dastardly. He kills people. He remade X-Force into a team of child assassins. He became a martyr on purpose, sacrificing himself because he knew the younger mutants needed someone to become their symbol to rally around. So, while we may not always approve of his actions, the bottom line is Cyclops is still one of the best when it comes to prime leaders in the Marvel Universe. While a very different character, he's on like a Captain America level of leadership. And that's like people universally agree to that, so not making that up. I know you're all thinking it.
Sunspot's powers, as one would hope, are solar based. He's not one of those heroes with an unrelated name. Sunspot can fly, which again is not uncommon, but it's how he can fly which is interesting. And there's actually more than one way for him to do so. One is this way, by creating thermal updrafts, manipulating the heat and currents in order to propel himself. So it does require concentrating and for his powers to be charged. He has since combined/switched to using another method of propulsion.
While many people think of Illyana's magical abilities and her soul sword, it becomes becomes easy to forget sometimes that while a powerful magus, she is also a mutant, and that magic itself is not her mutant ability, but rather something that she was just trained in. Her mutant powers involve teleportation. She can teleport herself and other people through space and even through time, teleporting people as far away distance-wise as another planet. Her teleportation discs, however, are connected to Limbo, meaning that whenever you move through one of her teleportation portals, you must first pass through Limbo in order to get where you're going. It's still debated as to whether or not this is an inherent part of her mutant ability, or whether or not it was influenced by her time spent in Limbo as a child when she was kidnapped. I like how I just keep alluding to that, but I'm not actually giving you anything else. I swear there's a point where I'm going to explain that a bit more.
Similar to DC's Man of Steel, Wonder Woman has a whole lot of tricks up her sleeves, or rather, armor, or bracelets. Now, these powers may not be much of a shock to you if you're familiar with her history. This power specifically is a product of Diana being bestowed powers from Hestia, who also, according to this origin, hooked her up with her lasso of truth. There's been some retconning over the years. Because of this invulnerability, she can withstand the heat from her lasso, which makes it ineffective on her. While this is a power that Diana doesn't exercise often like some of her more obvious abilities, super strength, flight, etc., it has come in handy in cases where she's been engulfed in flames, including an instance when Ares, one of her biggest foes, attempted to use flames to weaken her. It's also something that came in handy during the 2017 Wonder Woman film, when Diana faces off against Ares again, surrounded by flames, and doesn't even break a sweat. If she ever gave up fighting crime and evildoers, she could have a very promising career in the firefighting business.
Well, this is Bishop's mutant ability, so if you are a huge Bishop fan, you should know about it. I feel like most people don't know a lot about this sometimes ally and sometimes villain to the X-Men, so I thought it was important to touch on it. Bishop's mutant powers allow him to absorb and redirect energy. Basically, if you hit him with a blast of energy, he can just send it right back at you, acting like a conduit. He can also store this energy though, and use it later instead.
Now, Gwen has an incredibly analytical mind, one that seems like it was made for the sole purpose of detective work. It's no wonder she became a superhero after obtaining her powers, because combined with her above average intelligence and her incredibly strong sense of justice, she uses her skills to hunt down the most dastardly villains from her universe. And, you know, of course, being the daughter of a police officer helps, as she was already familiar with police protocols and their methods.
There are two quite different versions of Days of Future Past, the comic book version and the feature film version. In the comic book, it is Kitty who goes back in time, not Wolverine, and is sent back into a younger version of herself by Rachel Summers. However, in the film, this plot was slightly changed, as Kitty would have been too young to go back as far as was needed in that timeline. Instead, we see her send Wolverine back, filling in for Rachel's role. This version of Kitty Pryde seemed to have developed what many theorized would be a secondary mutation, the ability to chronoskim. That is the ability to send herself or others back in time to a host body which they can then inhabit. If you're a huge time travel and board game nerd like me, this ability appears similar to that of tech you use in the board game Time Stories. Also, if you like board games and you haven't played Time Stories, you should play it, it's fun. While this isn't something we've seen Kitty do in comic books, it would be super cool if this ended up being her secondary mutation on Earth 616 as well, phasing people through not just space, but also through time.
Beast has heightened superhuman senses, which include his sense of smell. Similar to some animals, he can see, hear, and smell distant objects way more clearly than the regular old human can. This means he can identify others based on their scent, making him fantastic at tracking. When Colossus was brought back to life, Beast was able to tell that it was the real Colossus based off of his scent alone. While we're on the subject of senses, even though it has nothing to do with smell, another neat sense-based thing that Beast can do is detect electronic signals through solid walls and floors thanks to how sensitive his hands and feet are, meaning he can pick up on bombs, listening devices, that sort of thing. Pretty cool, ain't it?
It took Carol a while to become Captain Marvel proper, as she is another character who dealt with a lot of soft reboots. Really, that's just a comic thing. A lot of authors want to put their own stamp on a character, or update outdated plot points. Why bring this up? Well, because she couldn't fly originally, after becoming Miss Marvel. Or well, she could, but it was because of her costume. However, by the time the 80s were rolling around, she was flying under her own power. In fact, Rogue gained her powers of flight from Miss Marvel after she absorbed all her powers and memories. So yes, Captain Marvel can fly, for reasons. Oh, and she's also a pilot.
Sometimes people forget just how skilled of a telekinetic Jean really is. Likely because we were too busy having our minds blown by her powers, capacities, and the Phoenix and her just telepathic achievements. And yet, while her telekinesis skills might not seem as great when compared with her telepathy, they are still pretty awesome. Even before she became superpowered by the Phoenix Force, Jean could utilize her telekinetic skills to make herself fly. Though admittedly as the Phoenix, she can not only fly, but can additionally fly faster than the speed of light. And also as the Phoenix, she did seem to forget sometimes that she could have even flown before, which is kind of weird. She's like, oh my gosh, I can fly. And I was like, you could fly before, girl. What you freaking out about? Calm down. So while not as fancy as some of her other powers, even this one gets a pretty insane upgrade from her merging with the Phoenix Force.
With that kind of mind, you need to be able to take in details at a faster rate, which essentially gives Quicksilver a photographic memory. Now you might be thinking, photographic memory is cool, but it's not a superpower. But you might not know this, but there is no evidence suggesting that photographic memory even exists, which, given the circumstances, would actually make it a real superpower. So I'm giving it to Quicksilver.
While Domino is a mutant, it's uncertain as to whether she always had the X gene or it was something that was altered with her body when she was a child. Domino was actually born in a secret government breeding program called Perfect Weapon, which sought to breed and then train living weapons, herself included. The experiment went a little haywire and Domino was assumed to have been the only one who survived. Now this is where her pale skin and the tattoo over her eye comes in the comics. That's where she got it from.
Cyclops has blast immunity when it comes to his brother Havoc's blasts. His brother can devastate and obliterate anything he locks onto with his own shockwave-like blasts, which are emitted from his body, often more specifically his hands. Well, that is unless he targets Scott. Alex himself likewise has immunity to Scott's optic blast as well. Well, usually anyways. And to be clear, they can still attack one another, but the damage is simply negligible. It can be easily shrugged off due to their built-up immunity to each other. And when it comes to his own blast, Scott is completely immune. That's how he still manages to have eyelids and can even prevent his eyes from emitting optic blasts when they are closed shut. Though he does still often have to sleep with his ruby quartz visor to be safe. I always like to imagine him with like a ruby quartz like eye mask. I think that would be super cute. Probably never gonna see that in the comics though, might be too cute for Scott. Not for me though.
Sunspot has the ability to enter a state for maximum energy absorption. This turns his entire body black except for his eyes, which turn white, and this allows him to absorb far more solar energy. In this state, he is entirely non-reflective, and it's just pretty cool to look at. In this form, he produces what is called a corona effect, an aura that exists around him, which can be depicted a few ways artistically. One of them is black dots swirling around him. You know the ones you get when it's too bright or when you looked up at the sun even though people told you not to?
Ilyana can call up a scrying glass to help her see where she is going, what it looks like inside and out, and also use it like a map to guide her to that place. She has done this before while in Limbo. It's basically like Google Maps complete with Street View. And she can even use the glass to see the history of a place, learn about how it was created or made, something Google Maps doesn't have yet, but maybe one day. You can Google it though. You could be like, who made this church? When was it made? How was it made?
Superman isn't the only DC superhero who can pull off a nifty trick with his lungs. We're talking about his ice breath, in case you're wondering. Wonder Woman may not be able to turn her breath into ice, but it is still pretty powerful nonetheless. During the Silver Age, under the creative guidance of Robert Kanigher, Wonder Woman was given the ability to have super-powered breath, the equivalent of a high-powered jet of air blowing out of her lungs and body. It was a move that even appeared in the Linda Carter Wonder Woman television series, and later resurfaced in the New 52 in Volume 4 of Wonder Woman, Issue 3, when she lights a series of pyres of flame, using her breath to turn a regular flaming torch into a makeshift flamethrower. Like, imagine if you could just like bust out a lighter and immediately have your own homemade flamethrower just based off of like blowing hard. That would be really dangerous actually. Don't try that at home, kids.
Bishop served in the future with Xavier's security enforcers. You could also kind of call him a time cop, like Cable, but in a different way. Bishop is basically a cop displaced in time, sent back to the past originally, where he ends up joining the legendary X-Men, who in this time are dead and borderline worshipped by mutants. Xavier's security enforcers, aka XSE, trained Bishop with weapons, making him a master marksman. They also had their own guns that they supplied him with. The XSE guns that he uses in fact work alongside his mutant ability, allowing him to channel the energy that he has absorbed within him, meaning that hitting Bishop when he's armed with his future guns means you're basically just giving him ammo, so he can shoot it back at you. Pew pew!
Ever wonder how every version of Spider-Man is able to seamlessly swing around their respective cities, jump around from incredible heights, and slide through any opening while still maintaining their composure and positioning? Well, it's because of their unmatched equilibrium, and Spider-Gwen is no different. Gwen possesses the ability to achieve a state of perfect equilibrium in any position imaginable. She seems to be able to adjust her position by instinct, which enables her to balance herself on virtually any object, no matter how small or narrow. Speaking of web-slinging and seamless movement, who is excited for the Miles Morales Spider game that is announced for the PS5? Man, Spider-Man PS4 was one of my favorite superhero games to date, so obviously I am getting that as soon as it comes out. But Sorry, we're getting off track. Let's keep going.
People think of Kitty Pryde, they often think of her phasing abilities. She can pass through almost anything, partially or fully. She can even use her powers to cause others to phase. But what some people forget is her partial phasing could also allow her to really mess you up. In one of the what ifs, Kitty used this ability to defeat Logan after he had been kidnapped and brainwashed by the evil criminal organization The Hand, who turned him into a ferocious and unstoppable killing machine. Unstoppable, that is, until Kitty stopped him. She did so by making her hand momentarily solid while passing it through Wolverine's brain, killing him instantly and ending both his life and the Hand's control over him. A mercy killing that I feel Logan himself could appreciate.
Similar to a few other members of the X-Men team, Beast ages at a slower rate thanks to his mutation. It's not as drastic as the others, the likes of Colossus or Wolverine though. It's a slight degree of slowed aging due to his regenerative healing factor. His metabolism is pretty impressive and can repair mild to moderate injuries at a superhuman rate. He's been in his prime for years, with an impressive vitality to boot considering he's way past 40 years old these days.
Enhanced strength. This is a staple and has been with her since her inception. It's a pretty base superhero power, though some heroes manage to get by without it.
It's understandable that with Jean comes fire. After all, her comic book foil is Emma Frost, who, while also a telepath, ends up often being associated with cold and ice, sporting her blue lipstick. If she is cold, Jean is fiery hot. This idea of Jean and fire transcends symbolism when it comes to her abilities to conjure fire through her connection to the Phoenix Force. The Force itself allows those it merges with to conjure a cosmic raging fire almost anywhere, including underwater and even in the vacuum of space. It's also really weird that Emma Frost and Jean Grey are actually referred to as like fire and ice and that type of stuff when they don't have any elemental abilities naturally. Weird. They're both just telepaths, but it's fine.
In the Marvel Zombies world, Quicksilver is actually instrumental for the widespread of the epidemic, due to the fact that his super speed allowed him to infect a large amount of people in a remarkably short time. Quicksilver effectively made it impossible to contain the zombie virus just because of how rapidly he was able to spread it. So Quicksilver may be the most effective zombie in history.
When you hear enhanced agility and reflexes, you're probably thinking it's a bit of a cop-out number. Most superheroes have that under their roster of skills. But Domino's agility and reflexes have a little extra something. As a byproduct of her probability skills, her cerebral cortex actually emits a current of bioelectric pulses down her spine. These pulses instinctively guide her movements when she's in danger or in combat, and with her additional training of her natural reflexes and agility, this has augmented those skills to near superhuman levels.
While many get triggered when I use the term laser eyes in videos, the reality is I do it to poke loving fun at the inconsistency of Scott Summers' powers. It's part of his comic book history. We may refer to the energy he emits from his eyes as optic blasts now, but the truth is optic blast was actually a term coined for him after his powers were retconned. Originally, Scott's powers were explained in that his eyes absorbed energy from the sun, and that solar energy was actually what created the blast. Hot solar energy. The only thing that could contain this solar energy was ruby quartz. This meant that his powers could be depleted and would sometimes need to be recharged. At one point he even managed to harness lunar energy to use instead, although lunar energy wasn't shown to be quite as effective, not quite as powerful. However, a lot of fellow comic book nerds had some questions regarding Cyclops' powers in terms of how they were supposed to work, and the source for his main ability was changed. Now his eyes would be known as portals to another dimension, overflowing with energy, where the logic of our world's physics did not apply. This made his powers appear more versatile, more limitless, and allowed writers more creative license with them. It also appeased fans, so just kinda weird. I love that we think that makes more sense. Oh, they're portals to another dimension. No, yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
When Sunspot is in this state, he does not require any human sustenance, so food or water, because he is existing entirely off of the energy of the sun. He is full-on solar powered, as green as he can be. This form also allows him to survive in space, so that is also a huge plus. Sunspot is interesting in that so much of what he can do is explained. Some people, you have the whole how do they do it? No one knows.
Due to Magic's connection to the Limbo dimension, she is insanely powerful there. This power comes from years and years of training to harness the Limbo energy. As such, she basically is the queen of Limbo and is basically at god level when she is there. Limbo is also known as the Other Place. It is a magical dimension filled with demons and was originally ruled by the demon Belasco, who kidnapped Ilyana when she was just a child. She was kind of like his apprentice, slash adopted child, slash potential future love interest until she overthrew him. And it's less like the religious Limbo and more like a pocket dimension just filled with demons. To be honest, it's actually a surprise to me that she doesn't use this power more in battle. When you think about it, she could just teleport you to Limbo if you were fighting her and then just do whatever she wanted with you there later. She really doesn't even need to use her soul sword most of the time, but I guess it just makes her feel cool and she thinks she looks cooler, so sometimes she prefers it to just doing away with you in limbo. Or teleporting you just, like off in the middle of space. That's what I would do.
Astral projection definitely has its benefits. It is often a power that we see used by mystical or magical characters in the world of comics. I mean, Marvel's Doctor Strange definitely comes to mind when you think of astral projecting. But it is also something that once upon a time Wonder Woman could do back in the day. She once used it alongside Etta Candy to communicate with Steve Trevor, and again went on a rescue mission to retrieve Artemis from Hell. Whether or not this power has been completely removed from the character's roster of abilities is debatable. We have yet to see her use it in her most recent incarnation, making many believe that it is no longer something she possesses. Speaking of more obscure powers though, let's move on to our next number, which very much falls into that category.
Not only can Bishop take in energy and release it back at his opponents, but his powers also allow him to convert the energy if he so chooses. This ability actually makes it hard to determine just how strong Bishop is, as he started to learn how to use this to increase his strength or bolster his own endurance. And he can kind of pull energy from just about anywhere. His body is resilient enough to absorb powerful psionic or magical blasts, and it is sensitive enough to slowly pull energy from falling snow. That's right, falling snow. I know, that's crazy. The energy of snow.
Okay, now, technically she doesn't have this as a superpower, but in Disney XD's animated Spider-Man series, her Spidey origin is changed around a little bit. In the series, we see Spider-Gwen creating the illusion of most of her powers. As a native of Miles Morales' dimension, Gwen Stacy took over the Spider-Man mantle after Miles was transported to Peter Parker's dimension. Then, after stealing her technology from her father's robot program and teaming up with her universe's Aunt May, Gwen managed to simulate her spider powers without actually having any. She uses magnetic grips in her gloves and her boots to accomplish wall crawling, as well as digital sensors in her mask to simulate having spider senses.
Having traveled the world and even beyond with her pals the X-Men, Kitty Pryde has also grown up to become knowledgeable when it comes to other cultures and languages. She learned how to speak Japanese during her adventures with Wolverine. Being very involved with both Colossus and magic also helped to give her an interest in Russian as well, which she also appears to be fluent in. And being Jewish, she also appears to know some Hebrew as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if she were also fluent in that language. Off-world, she also speaks a few different languages that belong to the Shi'ar and can speak the Skrull language Skrullos as well.
Okay, so obviously you know that Beast has claws and fangs. Duh. But they're much more than just aesthetic choices by his creators Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. There's way more thought into it than that. Hank's claws are 3 inches in length, retractable, and on both of his hands and his feet. They are capable of tearing up materials like stone, wood, metal, and even flesh effortlessly, and allow for him to easily grip surfaces of all sorts, even vertical ones, while climbing, wedging his claws into even the tiniest of cracks. In addition to that, his fangs are cool too. He has elongated canines that are very effective and painful in combat.
Captain Marvel can withstand a lot of attacks thanks to powers we will discuss a little later, and as a result can absorb not only energy attacks, but magical ones. However, she cannot absorb magic without consequence. Magic is a different beast, and it's not uncommon to have characters who are very strong in the general capacity have a vulnerability to it. Magic can be treated as another realm, where all bets are off.
One of Jean's abilities allows her to siphon psychic energy and use it to power herself. We see young, future Jean do so in the comic Generations Jean Grey/Phoenix, when she and the Phoenix version of Jean are taking on Galactus. As Galactus tries to feed on the Phoenix's energy force, young Jean uses psychic energy from all around her, even siphoning energy from Galactus himself, to power herself up in order to deliver a powerful punch right to Galactus' face, successfully knocking him down as a result. As the Phoenix, we have seen this power in Jean evolve, allowing her to absorb the energy of entire stars, like when she ended the Debari race and their planet during her time as Dark Phoenix. Okay, so I know that wasn't really Jean because retcons, but I'm still counting it because it's just so iconic. So let me have it, guys, let me have it. There are some retcons that are best ignored, and I feel like that's probably not one of them actually, but I feel like it's such a good moment you should ignore part of it at least.
Initially, Quicksilver was only able to run at the speed of sound, but after an exposure to isotope E, Quicksilver was able to run at speeds of up to Mach 10, which, combined with the power to resist friction and kinetic impact by vibrating his molecules, enable him to walk on water, even running across the Atlantic Ocean. Not a bad augmentation by any means.
Domino knows her way around a firearm. Nina is skilled with various kinds of guns and explosives. She's got effortless accuracy and is extremely skilled when it comes to hitting targets or foes. Now, after she escaped the perfect weapon program, smuggled out by her biological mother, Nina was left with a priest in a church who would eventually raise her. Now, despite the time she spent there, all of the training and the experimentation from the perfect weapon program was just too dominant in her, so she left and became a mercenary. and a damn good one at that, putting all of her combat skills to use. And in addition to that, her probability manipulation lets her make impossible shots, hitting her targets when normally the chances of her making certain risky shots would be very, very low.
Okay, so we all know that Cyclops has a visor, and that his visor helps him flip the switch for his optic blasts. But what you might not know is that when he fires blasts in the comics and you see him clenching his fists, that's not just a flair for the dramatic. That fist clenching also has to do with controlling his powers. Say what? It's true. The controls for his visor are actually inside his gloves. They're comprised of a series of small buttons sensitive to pressure, allowing him to change the size of the opening in the visor and have very precise control over how much damage he wants to inflict, as well as where he wants to target that damage to. This may sound like a silly place to put said buttons. What if you accidentally clenched your fist in frustration? Until you realize this also gives Scott access to his powers even when restrained. Also means he can just take off his gloves and go to sleep with his visor on. So, pretty cool. Tie his hands, he can still use them. Put him to bed, he just takes off his gloves. Useless.
Now this may seem obvious, but it still bears mentioning, and that is the fact that Sunspot's body is immune to the heat that he consumes and puts off. So he's not going to burn up internally or externally, no degrees of burning for him. His body can convert the energy and his metabolism is designed for it, so there's no need to worry. No Venture Bro style shenanigans here.
As the ruler of Limbo, Magic has control of demons within that realm. Even Siam, a demon who was originally Belasco's servant, was converted to her side. Also, sorry if my pronunciation offends you, I don't know how to speak demon. After being sent after Magic to recapture her, she sneakily defeated Siam with magic and made him swear allegiance to her. Siam even remained loyal to her for a time before attempting to overthrow her rule of Limbo and control the domain himself. But for a time he was a very powerful ally, and even without him, Illyana has proved how powerful the connection to the demon realm of Limbo is by summoning demons to do her bidding.
Actually, when it comes to superheroes, it's no shock that powers can come and go based on the creative team helming a title. Wonder Woman has had her fair share of fluctuating powers and traits over the years, including this neat ability. Diana can control military personnel. This is an ability she gained during the New 52 after defeating Ares, and the mantle of God of War was passed on to her. In other words, soldiers of any sort will obey her commands. It's a rarely used ability, mainly because having this extreme kind of influence over other beings isn't really something that's Wonder Woman's jam. She doesn't like to take advantage of it, since she would literally be taking advantage of human beings when using it. Girl's got a conscience. Ares, not so much.
Energy absorption and conversion power, it turns out, is a powerful one, as you can use that energy to enhance so many other parts of yourself and even use it to grant yourself new powers and abilities. One such way the Bishop uses his mutant abilities to give himself another valued power is with healing. He can actually use the energy that he absorbs and stores to speed up his healing process, putting that energy towards his own body's self-repair. While this healing factor is not on the same level as Deadpool or Wolverine, it's still a fairly useful power that allows Bishop to appear more durable. And to be more durable, really.
Sure, Peter Parker may be agile, but he is nowhere near Gwen's level. Her agility is really where she shines compared to the other spider heroes. Her being more slender and having a much lighter frame, she can count on her body to take her that little bit further. This is most evident in her appearance in the Disney XD series, especially when you consider that she doesn't actually possess many powers in that universe.
This is really the ability you would think Kitty Pryde gets her name from. This ability is one that is lesser seen but is brought up occasionally and is related to her mutant phase powers. Due to the fact that she is weightless in her phasing state, she can use her ability to hide in the shadows, blending in with them, making her fantastic at sneaking when she needs to be. But while this ability may seem where her codename Shadowcat comes from, it truly is not. But we're getting there, we're getting there.
Okay, so this should be no surprise. Hank McCoy, aside from being an absolute genius with, might I add, a Nobel Prize and 9 Presidential Medals of Freedom on under his blue belt, can also speak a slew of languages. We've seen him speak Japanese and French in Avengers Volume 1 Issue 206, German in Avengers Volume 1 209, and Russian in Avengers Issue 207. He can also speak Spanish, Latin, Arabic, Latvian, and was being taught by the Black Swan several extinct languages too. It was actually a trade-off, with Black Swan teaching him 3 new languages, and in return, he was teaching her Latin. Always going for that knowledge, beast.
Okay, so flying is one thing, but what about flying really fast? Now what about flying at 6 times the speed of sound? Now this may sound like some kind of ordinary measurement, but things like this matter in comics. People want to know who is faster than who. This is so they can begin to work through some real calculations. So not only can she can fly fast. Am I reaching? Maybe.
Jean has the ability to transmute matter on a subatomic level. What does this mean? It means, well, that she could kill you in an instant, simply dissipating all your molecules. Ugh. Sounds painful. Or she could transform gold bars into a crown, and swords into a throne. Cause you know, if Jean were a character in Game of Thrones, she could just make her own throne and just demand everybody's surrender. Cause she's just that OP, and that much of a queen. Am I right? All hail the Black Queen? Shouldn't be glorifying the fact that the Hellfire tortured her. Hellfire Club is bad.
Quicksilver is able to move comfortably in environments where oxygen is reduced to a point where an ordinary human could no longer breathe, indicating that his breathing ability, something essential to any runner, is enhanced by his mutation in some capacity, which would also indicate that he has superhuman stamina.
Domino has some serious leader chops, my friends. Aside from being a pretty good team player, she's been a member of the X-Force for God knows how long, Domino has also led her own teams. She took over leadership of Deadpool's Mercs for Money group, which was a mercenary group that attempted to use Deadpool's fame to make a ton of profit. Wade was pretty terrible at managing the group, so Domino stepped up and took over, and also shut Wade out. She also led an X corporation when Charles Xavier put her in charge of one of the branches that was dedicated to improving the welfare of mutants' lives. Unfortunately, this ended badly for Domino when her partner Risk was murdered.
Despite having siblings who appear more powerful than him, Mr. Sinister has always had, and continues to have, an obsession with Scott Summers. Why? Well, he's also obsessed with the whole Summers line, of course, but according to him, Scott is the genetic key to creating the most powerful mutant of all time. This is due to his superior DNA. But what does that mean? Well, I don't know exactly. I'm still waiting for Mr. Sinister's TED Talk on mutant DNA to help explain this whole thing in layman's terms. But for now, we just have to trust the villainous geneticist on this. I mean, I doubt he would have manipulated Scott's entire life on the scale that he has without facts to back up his claim. So he just has superior DNA. He just has it. Some people, they're just born with it. Some people, it's Maybelline.
One of the powers that Sunspot can use his solar absorption to augment is his own strength. He can only do this if he is fully charged, like he has to allocate where his powers go. He used to be able to increase his strength to be able to lift 2 tons, but was later increased with his overall abilities to where he could lift 50 tons, which is a significant increase. After his brush with Mpox, he was even more powerful, but using his powers in this state would be lethal.
This was more of a power that was touched on in older comics and now seems to have been somewhat forgotten. It was more of a power that Magic leaned on when she wasn't as powerful with her magics or as accurate of a teleporter. She could use her psychic shields to protect herself against extremely powerful telepaths, including Charles Xavier. However, it has been shown that some of the most powerful telepaths can still get through her psionic defenses.
Who wouldn't want to be able to speak any language? It's one of the reasons why we're envious of Wonder Woman. She has a heightened proficiency for languages of all sorts, which means she can communicate with pretty much anyone. She even knows how to speak caveman. Actually, it's a thing she did once. And in Volume 1 of Wonder Woman issue 115, her vocabulary was even extended to outside of planet Earth, with her learning to speak Martian. After Crisis on Infinite Earths happened, this ability was further refined. Rather than immediately being able to understand and speak to anyone with whatever language, it was revealed that she had learned every dialect rather than having some Deus Ex Machina power. Diana knows how to speak approximately 6,500 languages. Whoa. Which definitely became useful when she started doing more peacekeeping and working with the likes of the UN. Girl put in the work.
Due to the fact that Bishop can absorb psionic energy, this is actually shown to help him to resist psychic influence. To be clear, this doesn't mean he has strong telepathic defenses in place or can't be read, like Jean Grey or Wolverine or Kitty Pryde. It means that he can resist the influence of a telepath for longer. His mind is basically just more resilient, meaning that it takes a skilled telepath to get in his head. Any psionic attacks are greatly reduced in terms of their threat to him, and it can take longer for them to take effect as well.
Although this is generally associated with Peter Parker's Spider-Man, this is a power that Spider-Gwen also possesses. With the proportional strength of a spider, she's able to lift up to 10 tons or 20,000 pounds with ease. Combined with her signature fighting style, this makes Spider-Gwen an opponent you do not want to face one-on-one.
In the short comic series Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, Kitty finds herself kidnapped and brainwashed by the Yakuza, with new martial arts skills that allow her to be used as a ninja assassin. Fortunately, Wolverine is able to get her back and free her mind, undoing the brainwashing, but Kitty finds that she still has the skills learned from her time with the Yakuza. Accepting that this is now a part of who she is, she takes up the name Shadowcat, and it is because of her ninja skills that we even call her by this name. Although there are some other abilities that she possesses that, might make you question this bit of knowledge.
Jumping back a little bit here to discuss a series of abilities that actually sprout from Hank's regenerative healing factor, these next few numbers all pertain to useful powers that Beast possesses that we don't really see him flex all the time. The first is that he is resistant to contaminants, which, as you can imagine, definitely helps on the science front. Hank's immune system is highly advanced, which is why he's able to recover from ailments like colds or minor wounds at almost a comically fast rate. This also extends to being immune to things like tranquilizers, foreign chemicals, and the poisons used by characters the likes of Kraven the Hunter, or at least the poisons Kraven used to use in the early days when fighting the X-Men.
This is almost a must at this point in the Marvel Universe. There's a lot of battling with aliens and cosmic beings that take the heroes out there, so to just be able to maneuver without equipment is a huge plus, and makes a hero much more versatile. She needs oxygen though, but all this stuff varies. Really, with character powers you can take some liberties at times, and writers certainly do.
Mastermind may have used his illusionary powers to control Jean and transform her into the Hellfire Club's Black Queen, but when it comes to illusions, Jean herself also has some tricks up her sleeve. Or up her mind. She is able to create illusions by using telepathy. She can use her telepathy to affect the way you see her in your mind's eye, or to affect simply what you see or think you are experiencing just in general. Her telepathic and illusionary powers are so strong, she once even successfully used them into manipulating Magneto into thinking that he had killed Dazzler when he hadn't. Oh, and he also appeared to be wearing his helmet while this all went down, so that's pretty crazy.
After his sister Scarlet Witch removes most of his powers, Quicksilver receives some new abilities thanks to the Terrigen Mist, a naturally occurring mutagen. These abilities include being able to displace himself in time and move into the future, allowing him to create copies of himself. Notably, he used this ability to take down Magneto in Son of M number 5, overwhelming him with 2 additional copies of himself. Evidently, they shared some form of thought process, even continuing each other's sentences. Probably the coolest power he had, in all honesty.
Okay, bit of an obvious number here, but one that is quite true. Domino's a pretty impressive athlete. Nina has been trained extensively in various martial arts and combines her skills with firearms and combat with these techniques in order to pack an effective punch. Or shot, rather. Or both. She's highly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, and she's also an excellent swimmer, and has been considered an Olympic gold level athlete.
While we're not always aware of this power for a multitude of heroes, I feel like it has become a secret must-have if you just want to be part of the X-Men team. Everyone on the X-Men seems to just have it without our knowledge until it just randomly comes up in the comics. But I guess that's what happens when you work alongside and fight against so many powerful telepaths. Actually, this ability was harnessed and strengthened by Scott through rigorous training with Professor Charles Xavier, and through his close connection to one of the strongest telepaths in the Marvel Universe, Jean Grey, and later his relationship with another accomplished telepath, Emma Frost. Although his telepathic defense didn't protect him from having Jean uncover his psychic affair with Emma Frost, so yeah. Ooh. Feel like that would have been a good time to flex that defense. Feel like, ooh, don't find out. Oh well, she would have found out anyways. He would have told her because he loves her.
Sunspot can absorb light energy from more than just the sun. He can get it from other stars and spatial anomalies as well, but he's just too far away most of the time to get a significant amount. It is for this reason when he goes to other realms such as Asgard he gets significantly more powerful. In Asgard he was even able to lift Volstagg off the ground for a few seconds, which may not sound impressive, but essentially bench pressing a god is something to write home about.
This power is also one that isn't as often remembered. It comes from Illyana's ties to Limbo actually. As ruler of Limbo she is granted magical armor, which can be summoned simply from her using her magical abilities, although it has also been shown to be summoned simply through concentration. Typically the more that Illyana continues to use magic, the more that the armor will appear on her, eventually covering her whole body, but beginning to be assembled starting with her left side. It's important if you want to know all the facts about this armor. The armor being magical is lightweight and it protects her against magic. As time has progressed in the comics however, her armor seems to have also come up less and appears to be less of a power, but perhaps she's also grown so strong that she feels like it is less needed, or maybe it's just been incorporated into her look and it just gets skipped over as an ability. But it's still there, we just don't really notice it. She's got her weird like little hat things. I always thought that was part of her armor.
Dimensional teleportation as a means of travel doesn't seem to be one of Diana's favorites, but it is a power that she possesses and has used not only in the Golden Age, she often materialized and disappeared in the comics thanks to this power, but also in more contemporary times including in the New 52. But that latter use of teleportation is thanks to a mystical artifact of Hermes called the Catechus. In Wonder Woman Volume 2 Issue 28, she actually uses it alongside Hermes to flee from danger, teleporting out of the Chaos crossboyd. Tying this ability to an artifact seems to be one of the ways that DC has tried to make the character less overpowered over the years. Something that Superman has also suffered from time to time.
Cyberkinesis. A fight with Predator X left Bishop with one arm during his time chasing after Cable and Baby Hope, the mutant Messiah. To replace his lost arm, he got a robotic one. This arm is super resilient as well as dangerous as it is nuclear powered. Woo! That's a lot of power in one arm. Beyond giving him a strong bionic arm to use in battle, Bishop has also used it to interface and infiltrate other pieces of technology.
Now, unlike Peter Parker, Spider-Gwen's web shooters are self-sufficient and don't need to be refilled. Designed by the retired crime fighter and billionaire mogul Janet Van Dyne, the mechanisms help filter moisture from the air to create an adhesive web fluid that can create web nets, ropes, and globs, and many other shapes, as well as help her swing from building to building.
One of the reasons I think that we all love Kitty Pryde is because she's kind of the whole package. This is why she's often referred to as everyone's girlfriend in the comics, because she's kind of perfect and pretty much everyone likes her. Beyond being attractive and skilled with her power set, she is also adorable, an earnest do-gooder, and she's brilliant. She has a genius level of intellect and doesn't just sit on it either. Kitty uses her smarts in the tech department, becoming a whiz with computers, circuitry, and programming. Makes sense that she might be intrigued by electronics, as they are something her phasing powers will often leave severely messed up. She's just shorting things left, right, and center when she walks through electronic materials. Kitty even once used her computer skills to modify Cerebro so that it could be used by non-telepaths. Pretty impressive and useful. But everyone was like, man, I wish we had done this before issue 210.
Specifically, cold resistant. Thanks to his healing factor and his layer of blue fur, which by the way, his skin isn't blue, it's just his fur. Beast does particularly well in the cold. He's actually been frozen solid by Iceman in the past and managed to survive, with only shivers to show for it. Iceman has also frozen some of Beast's limbs before too, much to Hank's annoyance. Now this resistance should not be confused with an immunity. He can handle severe temperatures, but can be bested by them if having to endure them for great lengths, or if the temperatures are very, very immense.
This is a classic power that would later evolve into something else, and isn't really brought up anymore. We'll talk about that other power later. But initially, back in the day, one of Carol's powers when she first became Miss Marvel was a danger sense, which is essentially a spider sense. A soft precognitive ability to sense incoming peril. Definitely a useful skill to have. It makes you far harder to sneak up on.
During our self-titled series Jean Grey, we see Jean use her telekinesis skills in a way that she hadn't previously. With a little bit of guidance from Psylocke, she has now figured out how to construct her own psionic weapons. So cool! The thing that makes this interesting for Jean is that she doesn't really have the fighting know-how of her fellow mutant Psylocke, so she often has to get a little creative when it comes to which weapons she wants to choose to create. However, we later see her skill with psionic weapon creation develop, as although she isn't a fighter, as a skilled telekinetic she can create any psionic construct that she chooses, using any weapons she makes to inflict physical or mental damage, or she can even do both with them. What? Yeah, psionic weapons. They're cool. Not just Psylocke can use psionic weapons. Surprise, surprise.
After Quicksilver lost his powers, he exposed himself to the Terrigen Mist to regain his abilities. However, he also took Terrigen crystals into his body, which also gave him the ability to restore mutant powers that were taken away. That said, this process could usually prove fatal. Still, risk aside, it is a pretty impressive power.
Much of Domino's time on X-Force was all about flexing one of her best skills: being an assassin. Sure, she is a great mercenary, but with her probability-based mutation and all of her training, being an assassin kinda comes naturally to her. She's also been in situations where she's had to kill before, like the time she needed to protect her brother Lazarus from their birth mother, who attempted to murder him after losing her sanity.
Due to his danger room training, Cyclops is insanely skilled when it comes to his optic blasts. I'm sure it's hard enough to just aim using your eyes, as I don't think it would actually be as intuitive as we all think. And even the flick of your eyes to a different direction mid-battle could mess with where you are targeting. You'd also have to be quite focused. Scott is not only skilled when it comes to targeting with his blasts in general, but he can also bounce his optic blasts off surfaces, knowing which angles to approach in order to bounce the blast around in a less direct manner, avoiding obstacles and catching his opponents unawares. And in fact, firing his optic blast in a specific direction also requires a lot of control with his visor, as his eyes don't really allow him to focus a blast. It's often depicted that his visor is actually more where specific targeting comes in. I think he's got like panels that allow him to like adjust the angle. Part of this skill is practicality, and part of it is mind math, known as his super trigonometry skills. You do not want to play pool with Cyclops if he's using his blast. He will beat you. He will definitely beat you. Ooh, Hawkeye versus Cyclops in pool. Who would win? These are the questions.
This is a fancy way of saying that he can project heat in vast quantities from his own body. He can raise the temperature from any part of his body. He can also absorb heat to lower the temperature of any area, which of course comes in handy. Scarily, he can also channel this heat or remove it from people's bodies, so messing with their internal thermostats and all of the chaos that wreaks. That can be a very discreet attack as well. Pretty scary stuff.
Ilyana can focus and channel limbo energy through herself and emit it in blast form, kinda like Cyclops but with magic. Although really, they're both creating blasts through channeling energy from another plane, so actually not that far off from Cyclops. She can generally use this energy to shock or blast opponents away. She can also emit energy blasts from her soul sword.
Wonder Woman is magically inclined. In the Justice League Dark comic, Wonder Woman's dormant magical abilities were triggered by a villain called Upside Down Man. He recognizes that her magic powers are latent and, out of pure curiosity, he triggers them, activating them and awakening the White Goddess. Diana trips out a bit when it happens, noting that, I quote, "It's as if my veins are filling up with burning light. I can feel so much power, I've never felt like this before." She was actually the leader of the Justice League Dark team in its second volume during DC Rebirth. It's more so something that helps her blend in better with the rest of the team, I think.
For a time traveler who is often kind of tossed about in the greater scheme of places throughout time, Bishop has also been shown to be very self-aware. Not only is Bishop quick to pick up on where he is, but he's also fairly skilled at picking up on when he is. It's kinda like a weird sixth sense, and a useful one if you're going to be spending most of your life traveling through time, like Bishop.
Thanks to that spider bite, Gwen's body is physically tougher and more resistant to some types of injury than the normal body of a human. Her body is more resistant to impact forces than anything else, so she can withstand greater impacts such as falling from a height of several stories, or being struck by an opponent with super strength that would severely injure or kill a normal human with little to no discomfort. Although it's not quite as strong as Peter's regeneration ability, it's still incredibly useful in the fight against baddies.
The Black Vortex allows those who use it to unlock the full cosmic potential of their abilities. In order to save Star-Lord's home planet of Spartax, Kitty submits to the power of the Black Vortex. Her newfound power enables her to use her powers to phase all of Spartax out of its amber casing, which it was trapped within. We'd all seen Kitty phase a giant bullet through Earth before, but phasing an entire planet through amber is something else entirely. She phased living people and all, so that's a lot of complex work, I think. I can't phase anything, but I assume that it's hard work.
Lastly, on the resistance front, we have telepathic resistance. While one could argue this moderate resistance to telepathic attacks and manipulation is rooted in his healing factor, realistically, Hank's psychic resistance is likely thanks to him being in close proximity with several very powerful psychic mutants, specifically Charles Xavier and Jean Grey. The latter having been on the original roster of X-Men alongside Hank, too. And we didn't get to see this power in use until much later, though. Beast was able to resist an attack from Cassandra Nova, a high-powered telepath, for a short period of time, although he would eventually cave. She used his own fears against him and reverted him to his more animalistic behavior that occasionally pops out.
This is tied to her energy manipulation powers that allow her to redistribute energy. She can then use this redistributed energy to accentuate and speed up her own healing, which can also help her stave off more serious injuries. She has even been shown to be able to withstand a nuclear explosion, recovering in mere hours. There's a lot of Superman comparisons one could make. Think about it. However, she's gone one further, even reconstituting herself Dr. Manhattan style.
To many, Jean has at this point become immortal in the comics, / impossible to kill, due to her many resurrections. But while many comic book characters find it hard to stay dead, Jean herself has actually become unique even when it comes to this commonplace comic trope. The Phoenix Force has chosen to resurrect her before and saved her life more than once, it's true. But she has also on occasion managed to force the Phoenix Force to resurrect her by herself. Beyond that, she has also been resurrected without its help. What powerful force has made this come to pass other than the Phoenix Force? Why, Jean Grey herself, of course! That's right, after poison killed her and then again during End Song, she brought herself back to life. Just alone. She didn't even need the Phoenix Force. Crazy.
Another advantage of Quicksilver's abilities is that he's able to detect vibrational patterns in his environment, effectively enabling him to be his own compass. This skill is particularly advantageous when in open areas and allows him to maintain orientation while traveling at high speed. Nothing too special to say about that, but a very useful ability.
Okay, so yes, this is a weakness rather than a superpower, but let's get real for a sec, friends. We have 10 numbers to fill, and our girl really only has 9 points to talk about. Also, this is a very surprising fact unless you've read Volume 3 of Deadpool. You know, you probably wouldn't know this. Domino has something called gallanophobia. What's that? It's a fear of chickens. roosters. Anything that clucks and walks with 2 legs and potentially lays eggs. When Domino is working alongside Wolverine in issue 18 of that series that we just mentioned, they're crawling through an air vent when Domino is frozen in fear of a chicken that also happens to be in the air vent. It's a pretty hilarious moment. And when Deadpool asks her about this fear, she won't tell him why, and instead throws him out of a window.
The Black Vortex is a construct that allows those who possess it to unleash their full cosmic potential. In Cyclops Volume 3, a younger version of Cyclops from the past was working with his dad Corsair and the Starjammers, who were actually tracking the Black Vortex. And Cyclops ended up being imbued by its energy after he and his teammates, Young Iceman and Groot, became trapped on the ship where the Vortex was and had to fight their way out. They all decided to submit to the Vortex, and in so doing were granted its cosmic power, becoming the most powerful versions of themselves. Cyclops himself had an awesome suit that appeared to allow him to channel his blast through his eyes, his head, his neck, and his chest. And instead of his visor, he's actually wearing a mask, implying that he has more control over his blast ability. Also, Iceman looks like an ice elf, and it's like super cute and awesome. I just love a good ice elf. Also that hair, he has such nice long hair. Elves are so cute.
On top of just gentle heat emissions, Sunspot can generate concussive blasts. This was a direct result of a plot designed to enhance Roberto's abilities. He was captured by a supervillain named Gideon, who blasted him with as much solar power as possible to test just how much he could absorb. This overloaded Sunspot would eventually manifest as concussive blasts that he would be able to use to propel himself to fly. At first it caused him to leave a trail behind him, but he eventually got to the point where he was able to do it more seamlessly and discreetly, and also propel himself into space.
An ability often used by telepaths as a powerful mage, Illyana can also leave her own body, projecting her astral self out into the world. She shares this ability with other powerful mages of the Marvelverse like Doctor Strange. Illyana often uses this ability to scout out places while in her astral form, which usually also conceals her from detection, of course unless other telepaths or magic users happen to be around. She can also transport herself to the astral plane while projecting and battle there, like most other telepaths. Not that she's a telepath. She's not a telepath, just so you know.
As if she weren't powerful enough, Diana also has telepathic powers. This is yet another fluctuating ability which actually began as far back as the Golden Age in Sensation Comics issue 3, before she was given her own self-titled solo series. Back then it was called her mental radio, and it was an actual device, which is how she kept in contact with her family and friends back home. But then Volume 1 of Wonder Woman rolled around, and in issue 105 things were retconned a bit, with DC giving all Amazonians limited telepathic powers which must be honed by intensive training. What can't those Amazonians do?
Remember when I mentioned that Bishop could convert his energy into different kinds and even hold on to it to increase his own energy in a fight? Well, he can also use that energy to do even crazier things, including using it to fly. How exactly this works, I'm not quite sure. Most people that fly usually have their flight power explained as a form of telekinesis, but for Bishop this likely isn't that, as he doesn't really possess telekinesis. My guess is that he could be using that energy to alter his atoms somehow to make himself more buoyant in some way, or propel himself like a jetpack.
Now, although this is also technically not a power that she possesses, this is still a really cool gadget that she's obtained. Starting out as a dimensional travel watch, after getting help from her Earth 3109 counterpart Gwen Maxine Stacy, the Green Goblin of that Earth, our Gwen is given the Ticket to the Multiverse, a pendant specifically keyed to her body's unique radiation signature. It allows her to hop freely across multiverses, making it easy for some fun Spider-Gwen crossovers. It can also be worn as a bracelet, but I don't know why you would do that because it is one badass pendant.
Kitty Pryde can now phase through just about anything, though in the beginning thicker materials gave her trouble. I mean, considering she originally had to hold her breath while moving through them, I get it. Walking through any thickness of wall seems like a challenge, honestly, to me. I wouldn't know where to begin. How do you walk through a wall? Thick or thin, just wouldn't work well for me. Moving through walls or people she can actually do without causing any harm to those things, but when moving through any electronic device or materials, she always causes some kind of disruption. While at first this ability can be unpredictable, Kitty has also demonstrated a good amount of control over it. Even early on, she wanted to use her phase ability to pick an electric lock, and after barely interacting with it, she just succeeded in doing so. So she might just be able to also look at locks and unlock them. I don't know if that's something we've just never talked about.
Beast has a secondary mutation that changed him drastically. In New X-Men Volume 1 issue 114, a secondary mutation kicks in for Hank that transforms his initial ape-inspired physique into one that is more so cat-like. He ended up requiring help from his past self in order to stabilize his present-day self. So this secondary mutation has caused some of his powers to fluctuate over the years and have given him different vulnerabilities, specifically one that is referred to as as his animal instinct weakness. What this means is that because of his secondary mutation, Hank finds himself dealing with his increasing animal instincts that arise from continuation of this mutation. Villains the likes of Cassandra Nova have taken advantage of this, making him act like an animal while under her control. Beast has also developed unsavory traits like a carnivorous taste for flesh, something that he is rather conflicted over. But it is not the end of the world for the Big Blue Mutant. As seen in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 Issue 18, there are ways of bringing Beast back to his civilized senses if he falls privy to these animal instincts, in which he loses his higher mental functions. Synthetic fiber laced with pheromones will do the trick, and so will aerosol smart drugs, and specific light sequences. Oh, and best of all, so can a ball of yarn. Oh.
This is a limited precognitive ability. Noteworthy, but in a world full of mutants, not as useful as full precognition. However, for Captain Marvel, this functions also as cosmic awareness, and is tied to her binary powers, and can allow her to sense crises before they begin. This is so high up on the list because even though it's so similar to what was once the Danger Sense, it is tied to a fan theory. Get ready. Some believe that in the MCU, her 7th sense will translate into her possessing the secret 7th Infinity Stone, the Ego Stone. The Ego Gem contains the consciousness of the cosmic being Nemesis, who is recreated when the Ego Stone is brought together with the remaining 6. Some believe that this is where the MCU's Captain Marvel will draw her cosmic power from.
Similarly to her longtime lover Scott Summers, but slightly differently, Jean can use her telekinesis to create a concussive energy blast. These can be used to cause great damage to her enemies or her surroundings. While she has also used this power in the comics, you can see Jean use this power in film adaptations too, like in The Dark Phoenix when she loses control and causes some pretty big messes with it, and honestly kinda overuses it a little bit. I think we can all agree. A little bit. You have telekinesis, I get it.
Quicksilver is able to vibrate his molecules at high speeds, but he's also able to transfer those vibrations to other objects, which can cause it to explode or collapse. And this is a skill he uses to escape prison upon regaining his powers in X-Factor, The Quick and the Dead. And of course, this ability to destabilize his molecules allows him to walk through solid objects.
Domino's probability manipulation, or good luck rather, doesn't just extend to the environment and individuals around her. It also keeps her alive. There's been multiple instances in the comics where we've seen her outlive a situation in which normally she would probably be dead. For example, Nina, whose last name is Thurman, was actually married to a dude named Milo Thurman. It was a brief marriage, with her having been hired to protect the scientist early on in her career. The two fell in love, got hitched, but then separated when Milo thought she had been killed. But surprise surprise, not the case. And in the recent Deadpool 2 film, in which Domino was portrayed by Zazie Beetz, the character is the only one aside from Deadpool to survive a parachute jump in which all other members of the X-Force were killed. Good luck does come in handy.
During the Age of Apocalypse storyline, Cyclops and Wolverine end up on opposite sides of the battle. Cyclops found himself temporarily allied with Apocalypse, and although in falling for the rebel and prisoner Jean Grey felt like he might be switching sides, this all ended up happening not quite fast enough. He came to blows with Logan, known as Weapon X in this alternate timeline, who showed up and fought to free Jean by himself. Unsurprisingly, once again, even in this alternate timeline, Jean was a huge part of these two's dislike for one another, and without the mutual cause of Xavier and the X-Men to unite them, their fight became a brutal one. Cyclops lost an eye and proved the power of his blast when he ended up breaking through Logan's adamantium-coated skeleton, severing his hand. Was it the left hand or the right hand? I feel like in comics, I feel like it was the left hand, but that's some real trivia for you. Tell me which hand it was.
Thanks to encountering Cable and being telepathically linked to him, he was linked with the Ascani, so he knew their teachings and of their tech. He was really into it for a bit, but after a while his interest waned. However, a trained Ascani could time travel at will. Time travel is really important to them. They're also pretty much merged with tech, like Cable.
The cool thing about having magical abilities is that you can kinda do almost anything. For magic, this includes healing. She has in her repertoire a healing ritual or spell. When she casts it, like in New Mutants Volume 1 Issue 17, it encircles her within a pentagram of white, hot flames. These flames then engulf her body and can heal her. Ilyana herself is actually known to be skilled in both black and white magic, and her white magic knowledge actually came from an alternate version of Storm. True facts.
Wouldn't it be cool to convert your brain energy into muscle power? Well, that is something that Wonder Woman can do, and she does it really, really well. She can unleash an extra amount of power in battle that increases her endurance, strength, and speed by charging herself with her mental energy. Now, this is a different power boost than the one that she gets from her bracelets, and puts her at risk of mentally not being all there. In Wonder Woman Volume 1 Issue 166, she loses her cool and goes a tad berserk thanks to converting her energy this way. It also happened again in issue 229 from volume 1 and in volume 4 of issue 12 of Wonder Woman's solo title. But here's the cool part. Apparently this is an ability that anyone can do in the DC universe if you stick to the intensive training regime of the Amazonians.
Ultimate Bishop comes from a kind of combination of Earth 1610 and Earth 2107. Future Earth 1610, which is 2107. You get me. He has an ability that the original Earth 1191 Bishop, who we often see pop up on Earth 616, does not. He can manipulate not energy per se, but can actually manipulate density. Encircling something in his density manipulation aura allows him to alter it, making it lighter than air or heavier than an elephant. He can use this ability to disarm opponents easily, but can also use it to alter his own density, making his blows more devastating in a fight or allowing him to float in midair. It's also a pretty cool power. I feel like we need to see more mutants with powers like that, because I think it's neat.
Now, I briefly glossed over this earlier, but unlike many superheroes, Gwen is not a trained fighter and instead uses a freestyle fighting technique, giving her the upper hand against skilled fighters because it adds a layer of unpredictability into the mix. It's also been stated that she learned most of her moves from kung fu movies. However, this definitely has some drawbacks because, according to Cindy Moon, Gwen doesn't know how to actually throw a proper punch. Despite this, Spider-Gwen is still considered one of the best fighters in the Marvel Universe, being able to use her spidey senses and superhuman strength to compensate, able to defeat some of the biggest Spider-Verse villains, including an assassin that was hired to take out George Stacy.
You may have seen someone moonwalk before, but this is like above that. What's crazy about this power is that it's never really been classified as flying. Instead, Kitty Pryde has the ability to walk on air. It is also an odd one. While many have speculated that it is a byproduct of her phase powers and intangibility, she also has been shown being able to speak while using it, which standardly Shadowcat is shown having to hold her breath when she uses her phasing powers. Granted, her powers haven't always been displayed consistently, and it could be that her time roaming in space, in the giant bullet, where I guess she reflected a lot, or her experience with the black vortex simply allowed her to understand her powers better and develop them further, to the point that she can now breathe and talk while using them. In fact, that is a thing that can happen, but I feel like we've also seen her airwalk and talk before this was established, so I don't even know.
While it has yet to be confirmed, Hank has speculated that his mutation is actually the result of something called genetic atavism, or rather, genetic traits that resurface in a species after spending generations and generations of being dormant. The reasoning behind this is why he has such a genius-level intellect and large brain, but an ape-like physique. To further support this theory, he also possesses something called neotenos, which are traits found in a descendant that resembles those of an ancestor, like apes. It's worth noting though that the initial inspiration for why Beast ended up with his furry aesthetic is due to Roy Thomas and Stan Lee wanting to make the character more visibly striking, and to capitalize on the success that Marvel was having with their Werewolf by Night comic series.
Following having her powers absorbed by Rogue, which left her temporarily comatose, lacking most of her memories and retaining only her enhanced genetic structure, Carol was abducted by the Brood and subjected to an evolutionary ray that turned her into binary. She drew her powers from a white hole and had the ability to absorb and manipulate massive amounts of energy. In this state, she could control gravity, heat, travel at the speed of light, and more. Essentially, this rendered her a cosmic being. This, however, did not last, and she lost her connection to the white hole. She was able to retain some energy manipulation powers, but on a much smaller scale. This loss of cosmic power alongside her memories led her into a downward spiral and a compelling storyline. Though now she can temporarily access these powers if properly charged. There are currently theories that the Captain Marvel to feature in the MCU will have Binary's abilities, which is why she is so powerful and considered to be the strongest. Which, side note, no one likes hearing that. It just makes people want to see that character fight with everyone else. Look at poor Superman.
You might have thought the list of empaths in the world of Marvel was, well, a relatively short one. And while I would agree with you somewhat, I would also remind you that empaths have a tendency to show up in places that you initially just forgot to look. Jean is truly a character who distracts us with her destructive and mind-bending powers, and as such it can be easy to forget her more nuanced skills. Among them is her ability to use her telepathy as an empath. Not only can she sense what you are thinking and feeling, but she can also change and affect it too. Similar to the MCU's version of Mantis, but more terrifying, as Jean could likely easily use this power on a global scale, just like that. You know what I mean? Not like an Infinity Gauntlet, just FYI. Not every time we snap we're talking about that. In X-Men Red, issue number 11, we see Jean use her empathic powers to change her enemy's allegiance, turning them from villain to ally by imbuing them with the feeling of empathy. And not just in the moment either, but the long term, creating in them a long-term everlasting change to the way they feel and think in certain situations within their psyche. Pretty crazy. She's like rewriting people. She's like, now you feel this way about these things. No problem.
I've only seen him use this ability once, and that was in the original X-Men comics way back in issue 44. In an attempt to give chase to Angel, he announces that he's recently developed the ability to fly, but can only remain airborne for more than a few seconds. By all means correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've researched, this hasn't come up since then. Still, it happened, and given its few appearances and obscurity, it's topping my list.
Domino's mutant abilities are ones that she does not have control over, like zero control, or maybe like 1% control, but we'll get to that in a sec. Her good luck is a subconscious ability, psionically initiating random telekinetic acts that she has no actual power over. It just happens. For the most part, it's triggered when she is in a stressful situation, with the effect of this power constantly emanating from her body. That being said, she needs to be engaged in a situation in which that power will be triggered. In order for her luck to take effect, she needs to be participating in an action in which she can affect the chance of the situation. There has been one situation though in which she was able to consciously use her powers, not 1%, affecting the probability fields of storm clouds above a group of ONE sentinels, with lightning striking them down. She's been working hard at practicing having cognitive control over her abilities for years now. In recent times, Domino actually has been struggling a bit with her powers coming in and out during the recent X-Force series, so here's hoping she gets a better grasp on it.
Scott one time used his power to channel happy thoughts through his eyeballs in order to stop an alien invasion, with a little help of course from his friends. This was back in the 70s in Volume 1 of Uncanny X-Men. Of course it's from the 70s. A race of aliens known as the Xenox threatened to destroy the Earth using the proximity of their piloted homeworld's gravity, but they had one huge weakness: their fear of positive emotions. Meaning that when Charles Xavier channeled all of Earth's positive thoughts and passed them telepathically onto Jean, who in turn passed them on to Alex Summers, who boosted them with cosmic rays, and passed them on to Cyclops, whose eyes they came out of in a beam of hot and awesome intensity, which was then cooled somewhat by Iceman as the beam made its way straight to the Xenox, the invaders were successfully scared off, defeated. Man, that's a lot of passing. That's like, these guys should play like sports more, I think. They'd be so good at it. And that's how Cyclops' spirit bomb ability saved the planet. Sure, he needed help, but geez, what a plot. So yeah, he can use his eyes to channel other things sometimes. Fun fact.
Sunspot used to be uncommon in the fact that his strength was not coupled with durability. In the original run on the New Mutants, his teammates would frequently remind him that he wasn't invulnerable. This would remain the case for a decade until the new run where his powers were expanded. On top of the concussive blasts, he was suddenly able to withstand the impact of a bus going full speed without so much as a scratch. He can now even take a laser straight to the face. So from 0 to 100 basically. Some loved this, others felt it made him less interesting. What do you think? Let me know down below.
Training with Doctor Strange made magic even more powerful. She already has all the knowledge imparted to her by Alternate Storm and Belasco, and all of his magical texts. So adding in the teachings of Doctor Strange has made her kind of an insane level of powerful when it comes to her magic use. At one point she used her knowledge to turn herself and a group of other supers, including mutants and some Guardians of the Galaxy members, invisible. In a gambit to buy time when her teleportation powers just couldn't quite cut it. Because if you can't teleport people somewhere, just turn them all invisible and it'll all be fine.
Once upon a time, Wonder Woman was in a ludicrous Silver Age story arc that had her completing various absurd tasks at the whims of a couple of millionaires, in order to raise money for a good cause, of course. I bring it up because this power was very prominent in that story and is often remembered as one of her wackiest moments in her history. You know the one. She communicated with a whale who then proceeds to try to lick her in a kind of sexual way, and then she babysits a T-Rex that she rolls around in a baby stroller. That went down in Wonder Woman Volume 1 issue 90. This was one of the earliest uses of her ability to communicate with animals, but not the first. It is a power that has persisted to this day. Sometimes referred to as a unity with beasts, she's used this power to communicate with dinosaurs in Wonder Woman issue 184 at Volume 2, and even made friends with a group of polar bears in Volume 3 of Wonder Woman issue 34.
Due to his training with the Xavier Security Enforcers, his body is also resistant to nanites, which is pretty neat, especially with how mighty those little devices normally are. I'm not even sure how someone builds up a resistance to them. I suppose just through exposure? Still, a very useful skill and resistance to have, especially if you are coming from the future, or if you wind up in a fight with Tony Stark. Let's be honest.
Best known as Gwenom, this takes place right after Gwen loses her powers and her abilities. Once bonded with the symbiote, she fully regained her powers without the need of any isotopes, with a notable power upgrade and all the powers of the main universe's Venom, including his tendrils, unlimited webbing, and a shape-shifting costume. At first, the symbiote kills his victims through lethal radiation due to being bonded with an incompatible host, but By the end of the original series, Gwen had learned how to balance her augmented skills with the symbiote, forming a true symbiosis as she defeated Murdoch once and for all. Now, according to Jason Latour, the idea of keeping Gwen and the symbiote bonded was both a way to differentiate her from Spider-Man, and then her own personal arc reconciling her powers and responsibilities as Spider-Woman.